All right. Having a little bit of a crisis here, so I'm behind on video. Surprise, surprise. But the thing that we're dividing everything into quadrants, right? Because I feel like the quadrants are something we can all wrap our minds around. However, the quadrants don't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Maybe they're 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Maybe it's just 1, 2, and it's a front half and a back half that you're covering. I had a trial search this last weekend, yesterday, where it was a large dining hall, and there were, if I were to quadrant it, it would have been like, start line is here, quadrant 1 was hot, quadrant 2 was hot, quadrant 3 was hot, quadrant 4 was not. And a lot of times you're going to find that there's a negative zone somewhere in there. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not odor there. It so happens that in this search, the quadrant 4, the negative one, had a wall of windows. Now, anytime you're searching in a room that has a wall of windows, you want to just go ahead and expect that there is going to be odor on those windows. Why? Because of thermal effects. And the odor likes heat. The odor is going to go there. So Cannoli was in the negative quadrant, and she was going up on the soda machines, and she was reaching up. She jumped on the couch that was over there. She was scaling up a little bit and had me thinking for a moment that there might be a high hide over there. She jumped off of all of that stuff and tracked it to a trash can hide in quadrant 1. A low trash can hide. Now, I happened to correctly read what she was doing as thermal effect, but that quadrant was still negative. And sometimes negative quadrants are what kill us, because if there was something to find in that negative quadrant, I probably wouldn't have gotten all of those reaches of behavior. Because the thing that was there, the hide that was there, would have sucked her in. And if she did give me reads on the windows, it would have been easier for me to dismiss it as being the hide that she had just found, because we want to think of collection as happening very close together. It does not often happen close together. It often happens clear across a dining hall, which is exactly what happened here. The trash can hide was in the, like, if I'm standing at the start line and this is quadrant 1, the trash can hide was in the corner of quadrant 1 toward the start line, and the collection from that hide was on the far end of the room where the windows were. So if you kind of empirically look at your search areas and where hides are placed in trial, you'll often have kind of clusters of odor. And because they cluster the odor, there are negative spaces. That doesn't mean that negative space is purely negative. You can look at, did I pull the video? Oh, I did. I was smart. I want to look at this one with you to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So this is quadrant 1 that she's in here. She's going to enter quadrant 2. And in quadrant 3, there's an elevated hide. And the elevated hide, Judy, remind me, it's right here, right? Up on this post. I did pull it, but I did not cue it. But watch, this is all coming from the elevated hide she hasn't found yet. Watch what she does on this back wall. This is kind of similar to the thermal effect that I was talking about, but here it's being created by this overhang. It's kind of going up here. Was it hot this day? Judy, was it warm out?
It's always warm out
I know.
in July. Yeah, it
So,
was probably
you
about
have
90
some
degrees.
thermal effect happening where that odor is kind of going up here and getting trapped up in the overhang and causing the dog to give some communications. This is the fall point of that hide. And here, given the behavior, we might be thinking, tree hide, right? Reevaluates the things she's already found. But this is kind of what I'm talking about seeing interest in the negative zone and why negative zones aren't necessarily purely negative. They're negative in the respect of there isn't something to find over there, but they're not purely negative in the availability of odor. And sometimes we get false reads in those spots because there's nothing to find there. The drifting odor, the collecting odor becomes more valuable. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. The dog tries to reach out to find something in that space. Questions?
Can I ask a question, Michelle?
Of course.
This is Jody. So in the beginning, you said that the wall of windows there's always information there. Is that meaning even though there's not a hide there, there's likely going to be drifting odor
Yes.
from somewhere else? So go there with, I mean, you just have to have your eyes open that it might not be a hide there, that it might be coming from somewhere
with
else.
a situation like that, don't read too much into the information that the dog is reaching out for there, because every odor molecule in the place wants to be there. So all of that odor is drifting over there and activating molecules on the window. Now, in this particular search in the dining hall, if you're in the lounge, I eventually am going to post this with a voiceover that explains what's happening. But it was a really fascinating search in terms of what odor was doing. There was an elevated hide in quadrant 3, just mildly elevated up on like a bar stool kind of situation that was close to the window. And while Cannoli was working it, she was working off the window, but when she got the bar stool, it was very easy for both of us to dismiss the collection that she observed on the window as coming from that bar stool. It was much harder for me as the handler. It was easier for her because she knew what she was doing and I'm the dope. But it was much harder for me to let go of that elevated stuff that I saw. Like, I left that search saying, she didn't give me anything to call, but I can't say for sure that there wasn't something up on the TV monitor, or I can't say for sure that there wasn't something on top of the soda machine. The dog didn't give me anything to, and I even watched my video back, and when I watched it back, I was able to say, you know what, I'm confident with, I'm good with that. She really didn't give me anything to call. It would have been a Hail Mary if I did call it, and I don't like to, that's not the way I want to get calls. So turned out to be nothing, that I read it right as a thermal event. That's what I read it as in the first place. But just having that extra knowledge helps. It helped me not ask her again about that space, because she nailed, there were 2 trash can hides in that corner. She nailed both of the trash can hides and then very aptly dismissed everything that she was working on the window, which is typically what happens. If it's a collection that the dog was working and they sort out where the collection is coming from, they'll end up being able to dismiss the collection point in the first place. And it will be less significant.
Would the window information be the same in the summer and the winter?
Usually, yes, because the sun impacts the windows. All you need is it to be a degree different.
Mm. Okay,
So if-
thank you.
to have a thermal effect. Yeah.
If it's like darker and colder, that wouldn't happen.
Darker and colder.
Trial.
I feel like windows always collect odor, but I don't know that I've searched at like nighttime
Yeah, that's a fair point.
in a situation like that, so I don't know. I know in trial pictures, oftentimes the windows will collect odor and cause you some sticky situations in terms of false alerts. Okay. Okay. So I want to investigate this week another situation where we have a higher volume of hides. So we're looking for 5 hides, 2 challenges. That doesn't mean all 5 hides have to be encompassed in those 2 challenges. You could put out some baselines and say, this is my elevation hide over here, this is my close hide over here, or whatever. But 2 challenges, 5 hides. And I want your quadrants, I want you to practice quadranting your area so that the quadrants make sense. So right now everybody's going like this primarily. If you find a long, narrow space, maybe you go like this. But I want you to practice dividing your space so that it makes sense in your head. So that you can look at the space and say, this is how I'm going to go about dividing it so that I can make sure that I cover all of the areas. Maybe it's perimeter to interior. Maybe it's a double circle kind of quadranting. That's fine. It's whatever makes sense to you. And this is the key to this session, really, is that, you know, I can tell you how I do it, but if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to stick. So we want it to make sense to you. Look at the space that's in front of you and practice quadranting it. If that means it looks like this, great. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. If I have a big square room like we did this weekend, that is what I'm going with because it makes sense to me and I can make sure that I've hit all of the pieces. If we have a long, narrow hallway, which we had a couple weekends ago, this doesn't make sense, but this does. Sectioning it as we go down the hallway. Okay, you can mark it with cones. You can tell me the sidewalks make sense to me, so I'm going to use them as boundary markers. You can tell me anything you want, but I want to hear. First of all, I want to see the dogs work the 5 hides with 2 challenges. That would be nice. But I also want to hear how you're dividing your space to make sure that the dog is covering it. One of those spaces should be negative. Okay? All right. I look forward to your videos and I will see you next week.
Thank you.
Good night.